Okay, so I am going to walk through my presentation on assistive technology, modified assessments, and data to drive instruction. So this all starts with some I can statements. These are things that I'm going to want my students to be able to do at the end of a unit. So things like I can use textual evidence to support analysis. I can summarize a text. I can analyze the elements of a story. I can analyze the author's choice of words and meanings of words and things like that. And these are all based on an 11th grade English class. So some of the things I want to do in order to be able to track that progress would be obviously formative assessments. And some of the ideas I have for formative assessments are things like exit slips in order for my students to leave. So if I go through some Google Forms and let's say I give my students a Google form link and I say, I want you guys to fill this out before you leave the room today. It would look like something like this. They would have a question to answer, depth of knowledge, ask them what was his main argument, support your claim with the text, with evidence from the text, and they could write in a nice little paragraph here. And that would be what I want them to do as far as exit slips, as far as formative assessments. These could also include things like pre-test, post-test, that type of thing as well. Let me go back to present. There we go. As far as summative assessments, I plan on using Elluminate, an Elluminate assessment that I've already made. I'll show you in a few slides, and that covers a lot of those I can statements as far as the Common Core state standards and how they tie in there. And that'll be at the end of a unit. As far as plans for modification, so for formative assessments, if students needed handwritten exit slips, that could absolutely be made possible. Things like me reading the question aloud, making it easier for students to listen and have that auditory listening experience for helping them answer a question, and things like changing the depth of knowledge in the phrasing of my question. So this picture shows the depth of knowledge chart. I could use things, more level 1 questions or more level 2 or 3 or 4 questions based on where my students are at in that unit and things like that. As far as modifying summative assessments, I could use the site Elluminate has a lot of really great things. So like text to speech, for example, and I'll show you this in just a minute. But text to speech is really great for students. It helps them, they can listen to the test as they're taking it online, which is really great. And again, things like rephrasing the questions based on that depth of knowledge chart. If students are falling behind a little bit, maybe going back to level 2 or level 1, or modifying the opposite way, making it more difficult for students and really challenging them. So as far as plans for remediation, again, depth of knowledge, super important. More formative assessment, I think that's super important. So making sure that there are more of those exit slips and really checking in on my students and making sure they know what's going on and I know that they know what's going on. Pre-tests are super important. So, before the unit even starts, giving the students a pre-test just to see where they're at and see what they know already. And that's great for helping out with data as well, because I can take the data from that and compare it to the data at the end of the unit and look at that comparison and see how far they've come. And then lastly, of course, paying a little closer attention and helping out students that are struggling more. That kind of goes into multi-tiered systems of support, which I'll get into in just a little bit. So I'll show you the assessment that I created. So it's 10 questions. It's English. It's all about reading and understanding, the text and answering questions. So there are a couple passages with a couple questions about each passage. Each question kind of is based on a different state standard that all ties back to those I can statements. So like, for example, This question right here asks which assertion about the author's argument is supported by the text. This would be going off of that I can statement, like I can, use textual evidence to support claims, or I can understand the author's choice and argument and things like that. And the really really cool thing about Illuminate is whether it is reading the actual passage itself. So, like for example, anything you highlight, you just double click it and tell it to start speaking.
Ireland's Great Famine. From 1846 to 1850, Ireland suffered through a potato famine that is known as.
So you can have it read to you like that. You can also have it do the same thing for the questions, which is really great. So if students need those questions read to them, they absolutely can.
Question 2. Which assertion about the author's argument is supported by the text? A. The author believes the Irish are a strong, determined people because of what they suffered. B. The author implies that the Irish.
So you can kind of see how that works. And that would definitely be something that I would show to all of my students. So if I was going to give this assessment to my whole class and had them do it on a computer or on their computers, I would have all of them plug in their headphones and teach them how to do that as an option. And the students who really needed it could absolutely use it, and the students who didn't necessarily feel like they needed it wouldn't have to. They could just go ahead and read it and take the test the same way. But I think that's super important. So back to multi-tiered systems of support, looking at the way that my assessment, for example, applies. So the assessment that I created really is going to be easily accessible and available for those students in the universal interventions. That 80 to 90% of the students, they are going to be comfortable taking this test. They're going to be ready for that, and their data is really going to show that they make improvement. And they don't really struggle too much. The secondary level here, these students are going to need a little bit more support. Maybe they're going to be the ones using the text-to-speech feature, or maybe these are the students that I will be reading the questions out loud to during the formative assessments, or giving them handwritten formative assessments and things like that. And then the third level up here, these are the students that I'm going to really have to focus on with the help of a paraprofessional or some sort of a pull-out method of teaching, things like that, really honing in and helping out these students. And maybe it just might be taking that assessment a little slower and things like that, but keeping it available to all levels of students, I think, is important. And lastly, reflecting on all of this, I think getting the opportunity to create an assessment like this was super cool, and it was a lot of fun. And I like the idea of creating plans for remediation and how I can make things like this accessible to all students so that they are able to all understand and excel. And I like the idea of focusing on the data and having that backup, as proof of my students made an improvement and things like that, and seeing how far they come. And I think, even showing that to students is really cool, so they can see, wow, I actually learned a lot during this unit, which is awesome. And so that wraps that up. Thank you very much.